Good morning, everyone. I'm Russell Elron Monasterio, the second reporter, and now we'll learn more about the Albert Bandura social learning theory. Social learning theory focuses on the learning that occurs within a social context. Now, when we say social context, it is the social environment, and it refers to the immediate physical and social setting in which people live or in which something happens or develops. It includes the culture that the individual is educated or lives in. So, it considers that people learn from one another, including such concepts of observational learning, imitation, and modeling. Now, having said that, let me explain to you these three concepts of learning. Observational learning is a major component of Albert Bandura's social learning theory. This method of learning consists of observing another individual's behavior, attitudes, or emotional expressions. Now, let's talk about children and set them as an example, since all of us are dreaming to become an elementary teachers. A child learns to walk, and a child learns to play while watching others. A child learns to talk, and a child learns how to write, again, while watching others. So, meaning they are observant. These children learn from one another. Imitation is not far from observational learning. In fact, they have a very close meaning or explanation. Imitation is the action of using someone or something as a model. For instance, a child begins to talk while repeating the older one who is talking. Or children nowadays are idolizing Cardo Dalisay and follow him, so the result, they are doing what Cardo is doing on televisions by acting like they are Cardo Dalisay and started to form a dream. For instance, I will become a policeman someday. So they are learning through imitation. Now let's go on to modeling. Since all of us are education student, let's base this modeling into teaching. Modeling is an instructional strategy wherein the teacher engages students by showing them how to perform a skill or something that is related to our topic while describing each step with a rationale. This provides students with both the visual and verbal examples of what they will be expected to. Now, let's go on to general principles of social learning theory. People can learn by observing the behavior of others and the outcomes of those behaviors. So this is what I have explained to you a while ago, that people can learn from one another. Now, learning can occur without a change in behavior. So no matter how far is our knowledge or no matter how much did we learn, we don't have to change our behavior, because as what stated here, learning can occur without a change of behavior. And according to Bandura social learning theory, says that because people can learn through observation alone, their learning may not necessarily be shown in their performance. Cognition plays a role in learning. Over the last 30 years, social learning theory has become increasingly cognitive in its interpretations of human learning. Why? Because cognition is defined as the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. So we look at it as the mental processes relating to the input and storage of information. And that information is then used to guide humans' behavior. Social learning theory can be considered a bridge of transition between the behaviorist learning theories and cognitive learning theories, because it encompasses attention, memory, and motivation. Because this also emphasizing the importance of social learning. Now, how the environment reinforce and punishes modeling. When we say reinforce, meaning there is something is added to increase the likelihood of a behavior. While when we say punishment, there is something is added to decrease the likelihood of a behavior. People are often reinforced for modeling the behavior of others. Bandura suggested that the environment also reinforces modeling, and this is in several possible ways. The observer is reinforced by the model. For example, a student who change dress to fit in with a certain group of students has a strong likelihood of being accepted and thus reinforced by that group. Now, number two, the observer is reinforced by a third person. The observer might be modeling the actions of someone else. For example, an outstanding class leader or student. The teacher notices this and compliments and praises the observer for modeling such behavior, thus reinforcing that behavior. Now, number three, the imitated behavior itself leads to reinforcing consequences. Many behaviors that we learn from others produce satisfying or reinforcing results. For example, a student in a multimedia class could observe how the extra work a classmate does is fun. So, these students in turn would do the same extra work and also experience enjoyment. Now, number four, consequences of the model's behavior affect the observer's behavior vicariously. This is known as vicarious reinforcement. This is where the model is reinforced for response and then the observer shows an increase in the same response. So, Bandura illustrated this by having students watch a film of a model hitting an inflated clown doll. Once group of children saw the model being praised for such action without being reinforced, the group of children began also to hit the doll. Now let's go on to contemporary social learning perspective of reinforcement and punishment. Contemporary theory proposes that both reinforcement and punishment have indirect effects on learning. They are not the sole or the main cause. Because in reinforcement, you could receive negative or positive reinforcement. So when we say negative, it involves the removal of something negative to strengthen a behavior. And on the other hand, punishment involves either imposing something undesirable or taking away a positive stimulus to weaken or eliminate behavior. And learners can acquire new behavior and knowledge by merely observing a model. That is why reinforcement and punishment have indirect effects on behavior and learning because people form expectations about the potential consequences of future responses based on how current responses are reinforced or punished. Cognitive factors in social learning. Cognitive social learning theory suggests that human learns behavior by observing others and choosing which behaviors to imitate. Behaviors that are rewarded are more likely to be repeated, whereas behaviors that are punished are less likely to be repeated. Now, social learning theories contend that attention is a critical factor in learning because attention allows us to plan or preview, monitor, and also regulate our thoughts and actions. Attention is the first step in the learning process. We cannot understand, learn, or remember that which we do not first attend to if we will not start by attention. Now, Bandura proposed that behavior can influence both the environment and the person. In fact, each of these variables, the person, the behavior, and the environment, can have an influence on each other. Reciprocal causation is the idea that behavior is controlled or determined by the individual through cognitive processes and by the environment through external social stimulus events. The basis of reciprocal causation should transform individual behavior by allowing subjective thought processes transparency when contrasted with cognitive, environmental, and external social stimulus events. And as having said stimulus event is one stimulus and its associated parameters of an stimulus. So it is an event parameters specify things about the stimulus presentation such as when it occurs and also you can define one or more stimulus events parameters. Now, there are different types of models, namely the live model and the symbolic model. Now, what is a live model? Live model involves an action individual demonstrating or acting out a behavior. For example, a boy named Ben stood up on his surfboard so that a girl named Julian could see how he did it. Now, let's go on to the symbolic model. Symbolic model can be fictional characters, or for example, real people demonstrate behaviors in books, movies, televisions, show, video games, or internet sources. Now let's go to the behaviors that can be learned through modeling. Many behaviors can be learned, at least partly through modeling. Examples that can be cited are student can watch parents read, student can watch the demonstration of mathematics problems, or see someone act bravely in a fearful situation. And aggression can be learned through models. No, research indicates that children become more aggressive when they observe aggressive or violent models. Moral thinking and moral behavior are influenced by observation and modeling. This includes moral judgments regarding right and wrong, which can in part develop through modeling. Now, let's go to conditions necessary for effective modeling to occur. Bandura mentioned four conditions that are necessary before an individual can successfully model the behavior of someone else. Okay, the first one is the attention. The person must first pay attention to the model. Number two is the retention. The observer must be able to remember the behavior that has been observed. One way of increasing this is using the technique of rehearsal. Number three, the motor reproduction. The third condition is the ability to replicate the behavior that the model has just demonstrated. This means that the observer has to be able to replicate the action, which could be a problem with a learner who is not ready developmentally to replicate the action. For example, little children have difficulty doing complex physical motion. So number four is the motivation. The final necessary ingredient for modeling to occur is motivation. Learners must want to demonstrate what they have learned. Remember that since these four conditions vary among individuals, different people will reproduce the same behavior differently. Now let's go to the effects of modeling and behavior. Modeling teaches new behaviors. Modeling influences the frequency of previously learned behaviors. Modeling may encourage previously forbidden behaviors. And modeling increases the frequency of similar behaviors. For example, a student might see a friend excel in basketball and he tries to excel in football because he is not tall enough for basketball. So these are what we have noticed in our discussion. Now let's go to educational implication of social learning theory. Social learning theory has numerous implications for classroom use. So one of this is students often learn a great deal simply by observing other people. And number two, describing the consequences of behavior can effectively increase the appropriate behaviors and decrease inappropriate ones. This can involve discussing with learners about the rewards and consequences of various behaviors. Now, number three, modeling provides an alternative to shaping for teaching new behaviors. Instead of using shaping, which is operant conditioning, modeling can provide a faster, more efficient means for teaching new behavior. To promote effective modeling, a teacher must make sure that the four essential conditions exist: the attention, retention, motor reproduction, and the motivation. Now, the number four is teachers and parents must model appropriate behaviors and take care that they do not model inappropriate behaviors. Now, the number five is teachers should expose students to a variety of other models. This technique is especially important to break down traditional stereotypes. Now we are done with our reports and hopefully you had learned something. Thank you, have a good day, and stay safe.